There's something about the monitors Walmart sells that most customers never find out before buying one. They look like normal name brand monitors. They're priced to feel like a deal. But what Walmart doesn't explain is why those monitors are cheaper, and what's actually different about them compared to the same brands sold elsewhere. In this video, you're about to find out how Walmart sells downgraded versions of monitors, why researching them is harder than it should be, and why problems usually show up after it's too late to return them. This isn't information printed on the box. It's not something employees tell you. It's something many people only realize after using the monitor and wishing they hadn't bought it. Walmart sells worse versions of name brand monitors. This is where most shoppers get misled without realizing it. When you see a name brand monitor at Walmart, it's natural to assume it's the same product being sold everywhere else. The brand name, the size, and the packaging all suggest that nothing is different. But that assumption is wrong. Walmart often sells store-specific versions of monitors that are made differently to reach a lower price point. These monitors aren't fake or defective. They are intentionally built as lower-tier versions of the same product line. Behind the scenes, Walmart's pricing demands play a major role. Big monitor brands want Walmart's shelf space, and Walmart demands the lowest possible cost. To make that work, manufacturers quietly adjust the product by using cheaper display panels, lower brightness limits, reduced color accuracy, and sometimes lower quality internal components. To the average customer, none of these changes are obvious. The box still shows a trusted brand name. The screen size still looks impressive, and the price still feels like a smart deal. There's nothing clearly telling you that you're buying a different version of the monitor. That's because Walmart doesn't explain this difference. There's no label warning you that it's a downgraded model, and no sign telling you it was built differently for Walmart. You're expected to assume it's the same product, and most people do. This is why regret doesn't happen right away. The monitor turns on and works, but the picture doesn't look as good as expected. Colors feel flatter, brightness feels weaker, and long sessions can cause eye strain. Many buyers only realize something is off after using it for weeks. What makes this worse is that many online reviews don't match your experience. That's because those reviews are often for better versions of the same monitor sold elsewhere. You didn't accidentally buy a bad monitor. You bought a different monitor on purpose, without being told. And once you trust the brand name, that downgrade stays invisible. Walmart makes it hard to compare monitors properly. Even when you try to shop carefully, Walmart makes the process harder than it should be. Most people believe they can protect themselves by doing research. You check specs, read reviews, compare prices, and make sure you're getting the best value. That's the responsible way to buy electronics. But with many Walmart monitors, that process quietly falls apart. The biggest reason is the model number. Walmart often sells monitors with slightly different model numbers than the versions sold at other retailers. The difference might be one extra letter or a small variation at the end, but that tiny change means you're no longer looking at the same product. When you search that exact model number online, the information is limited. You don't see detailed reviews, professional benchmarks, or long-term user feedback. In some cases, the only place the model even exists is Walmart's own listing. This creates a dangerous illusion. You think you've done your homework, but you're not actually comparing the same monitor. You're looking at reviews and comparisons for similar-looking models that may use better panels or higher-quality components. Price comparisons stop working for the same reason. You can't tell if Walmart's price is genuinely cheaper or if it's simply the normal price for a lower-tier version. Without a true match, the deal has no real reference point. Reviews are where this becomes most misleading. Many review pages group together multiple versions of a monitor that share a name, but not the same internal parts. That means 5-star reviews can describe performance your monitor will never deliver. This is why people feel confused after buying. The monitor doesn't match what they expected. Even though the research seemed solid, it's not that the reviews lied, it's that they weren't reviewing the same product you bought. By the time this becomes clear, the purchase is already done. You didn't skip the research failed you. And that's what makes this system so effective. It doesn't stop you from trying to be smart. It just makes sure being smart doesn't fully protect you. And next, we need to talk about what actually gets sacrificed inside these monitors to reach those prices, because that's where the real long-term problems begin. These monitors cut corners. You don't notice until later. This is where the real cost of a cheap monitor starts to show, and it's why so many people don't realize they made a mistake right away. Most Walmart monitors don't fail when you plug them in. They turn on, display an image, and do exactly what you expect on the first day. That's why the purchase feels safe. Nothing looks broken, and nothing immediately signals a problem. The compromises are quieter than that. To hit lower prices, manufacturers often downgrade the most important part of the monitor, the display panel. Even when the resolution is the same on paper, cheaper panels struggle with contrast, color depth, and consistency across the screen. At first, your eyes adjust. You might think the image looks fine, but after days or weeks of use, something starts to feel off. Whites don't look clean, colors lack depth, dark scenes lose detail, and everything looks slightly flat, no matter how much you adjust the settings. Brightness is another area where corners are cut. Many Walmart monitors are limited to lower brightness levels, which makes them harder to use in normal living spaces. In a bright room, the screen looks dull. In a dim room, you end up increasing brightness or contrast in ways that strain your eyes. This is where discomfort sets in. Long work sessions feel more tiring. Gaming or streaming for extended periods becomes harder to enjoy. Headaches and eye fatigue become more common, even if you don't immediately connect them to the monitor. Build quality is also reduced. Cheaper backlighting can cause uneven brightness across the screen, with darker patches or light bleeding from the edges. These flaws are subtle, but once you notice them, they're impossible to ignore. What makes this worse is timing. These issues don't always appear within the first few days. They show up slowly, after you've already decided the monitor is good enough. By the time you fully realize what's wrong, returning it feels like more trouble than it's worth. That's how people end up keeping monitors they don't actually like. The monitor still works, so it doesn't feel broken enough to justify replacing. You settle for the downgrade instead of fixing the mistake. You didn't buy a defective product. You bought one that was quietly compromised from the start. And next, we need to talk about why the specs on the box don't protect you from any of this, even when everything looks identical to better monitors sold elsewhere. The specs on the box don't tell the full truth. This is where a lot of shoppers think they're safe, and where they get misled. Most people rely on specs to make their decision. Resolution, refresh rate, response time. If the numbers look good, the monitor should be good. That's the logic. But with many Walmart monitors, those numbers don't tell the whole story. A monitor can be labeled as 1080p or 14T40p and still deliver a noticeably worse image. Resolution only tells you how many pixels are on the screen, not how well those pixels are controlled. Cheaper panels struggle with color accuracy, contrast, and uniformity, even when the resolution matches better monitors. Refresh rate works the same way. A monitor can claim 75 Hz or 144 Hz, but that doesn't mean motion will feel smooth. Lower quality panels often rely on aggressive settings to hit those numbers, which can cause ghosting, blur, or inconsistent performance during fast movement. Response times are especially misleading. The numbers on the box usually represent ideal conditions that don't reflect real use. In everyday scenarios, the actual response time can be much slower, leading to smearing and motion artifacts that aren't mentioned anywhere. Brightness and contrast are also presented in ways that hide real-world limitations. Peak brightness might be listed, but sustained brightness and uniform lighting across the screen are rarely discussed. This is why a monitor can technically meet its advertised specs and still feel dull or uneven in use. None of this information is explained clearly at the shelf. You're left trusting numbers that sound impressive, but don't translate into real quality. Two monitors can share identical specs and still perform very differently once you sit in front of them. This is why people feel confused after buying. On paper, the monitor should be fine. In reality, it doesn't look or feel like what they expected. The specs weren't lying. They were just incomplete. And next, we need to talk about why reviews don't save you from this problem either, even when you think you've done everything right. Online reviews don't protect you from bad Walmart monitors. This is where a lot of careful buyers get caught off guard. Most people trust reviews because, in normal situations, they work. You read what others experienced, look for repeated complaints, and avoid products with obvious red flags. It feels like the safest way to shop. But with many Walmart monitors, reviews don't give you the protection you think they do. One of the biggest problems is how reviews are grouped online. Monitors that share a similar name or product line are often lumped together, even when they're built differently. That means reviews written for higher quality versions sold elsewhere can appear on the same page as Walmart-specific models. So when someone praises the color quality or brightness, they may be describing a monitor you're not actually buying. On your desk, the screen looks duller. Colors don't pop the same way. The experience feels noticeably weaker than what the review suggested. This creates confusion and self-doubt. You start wondering if your unit is defective or if you're just being too picky. In reality, the reviews weren't wrong. They just weren't about the same product. Timing makes this even worse. Many reviews are written in the first few days of ownership before long-term issues appear. Subtle problems like uneven backlighting, ghosting, or eye strain don't always show up immediately. They build slowly, over weeks of regular use. By the time those problems become obvious, the positive reviews are already locked in. New buyers keep seeing high ratings, while the people experiencing issues are no longer motivated to go back and update their feedback. This is how bad experiences get buried. The review system keeps showing confidence, even when the reality is mixed. That's why so many buyers feel blindsided. They trusted reviews to warn them, but the warnings never came. Instead, they become the ones discovering the problems later. And if you're finding this breakdown helpful, a quick like helps this reach more people, and subscribing means you won't miss future videos that explain what's really happening behind these deals. Because the next issue is what turns all of this frustration into something permanent. Small problems become permanent. Once the return window closes, this is the moment when a questionable purchase turns into something you're forced to live with. When most people buy a monitor, they don't immediately put it under pressure. You plug it in, confirm that it powers on, and assume everything is fine. As long as it works, the urgency to inspect every detail just isn't there. That's why timing matters so much. Many of the most common problems with lower quality monitors don't show up right away. Dead pixels can appear after days or weeks. Backlight bleed becomes more noticeable as you use the screen in different lighting conditions. Uneven brightness and color inconsistency become harder to ignore the longer you stare at the display. At first, you assume it's normal. You tweak the settings. You change the lighting in the room. You convince yourself it's something you'll get used to. But as the days pass, the annoyance doesn't go away. It grows. By the time you realize the monitor isn't something you're happy with, the return window is already shrinking or closed. That's when the decision becomes harder, not easier. The monitor still technically works. It doesn't feel broken enough to justify packing it up, waiting in line, and explaining the issue. So, most people don't return it. They settle. This is how small problems become permanent. Not because they're acceptable, but because reversing the purchase feels like more effort than living with the downgrade. Warranties don't offer much relief either. Many manufacturer warranties only cover clear failures, not quality issues. Uneven brightness, eye strain, or washed out colors are often considered normal variations, even if they make the monitor unpleasant to use. So the responsibility shifts to you. You adjust your habits. You avoid using the monitor for certain tasks. You tolerate something that never quite feels right. That's the hidden cost of buying a monitor this way. You don't just pay with money, you pay with daily frustration, reduced comfort, and the quiet feeling that you could have done better. And this doesn't happen by accident. It's part of a system that encourages low prices up front, while pushing the consequences onto the buyer later. And next, we need to look at why Walmart's entire business model makes this outcome more likely, not less. Walmart's business model encourages lower quality electronics. This is the part that makes everything else click, because none of these problems exist in isolation. Walmart's entire business model is built around one goal: offering the lowest possible price at massive scale. That approach works well for many everyday items, but it creates serious trade-offs when it comes to electronics, especially monitors. For manufacturers, Walmart represents enormous volume. Getting a product on those shelves can mean selling hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of units. But there's a condition attached to that opportunity. The product has to meet Walmart's pricing demands, not the manufacturer's ideal quality standards. So, brands make adjustments. They don't usually advertise these changes, and they don't frame them as downgrades. Internally, they're called cost optimizations. In reality, they mean finding every possible way to reduce manufacturing costs, without making the product look obviously worse on the shelf. That's why cuts tend to happen in areas most shoppers don't immediately notice. Display panels get cheaper. Backlighting systems are simplified. Quality control tolerances widen. As long as the monitor turns on and meets the basic advertised specs, it passes. From Walmart's perspective, this system works exactly as intended. The price looks competitive. The brand name builds instant trust. The monitor sells quickly, and most returns are avoided because the issues aren't severe enough to trigger immediate complaints. What Walmart doesn't prioritize is how the product feels after weeks or months of daily use. Eye comfort, long-term satisfaction, and consistent performance don't show up on a shelf tag. They don't affect the initial sale, so they're not the focus. This creates a quiet incentive problem. Manufacturers aren't rewarded for building a better monitor. They're rewarded for building the cheapest monitor that still looks acceptable to the average buyer. That's why better versions of the same monitor are often sold elsewhere, while Walmart carries the stripped-down edition. It's not because the technology doesn't exist. It's because selling the better version would push the price too high for Walmart's strategy. And once you understand this, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The confusing reviews, the late-appearing issues, the sense that something feels off but not broken, all of it traces back to this pressure to hit a price above all else. This isn't about one bad decision or one unlucky purchase. It's a system that consistently favors lower upfront prices, even if that means lower long-term quality for the buyer. And that's why most people don't realize what's happening until after they've already paid. The system doesn't fail loudly, it fails quietly over time. And that brings us to the final section, because this is where everything comes together, and where most shoppers finally understand what went wrong. Most people only understand this after they've already bought one. This is where everything finally makes sense, usually too late. Most people don't walk out of Walmart feeling like they made a bad decision. They feel relieved, they feel smart. They got a big monitor from a trusted brand for less money, and nothing about the experience feels risky in the moment. The realization comes later. It happens after weeks of use, when the screen never quite looks right, when colors feel dull, brightness feels weak, or long sessions leave your eyes feeling tired. You start to notice small things that weren't obvious at first, but now you can't ignore them. That's when people start searching again. They look up reviews, they compare specs, they wonder if their unit is defective, and slowly the pattern becomes clear. The monitor they bought isn't the same one people were praising. It's a different version. a cheaper one, built to hit a price, not deliver the best experience. By that point, returning it feels unrealistic. The monitor still works. The hassle doesn't feel worth it, so people keep it, even though they wouldn't buy it again if given the choice. That's why this problem keeps repeating. Most buyers don't warn others because the experience isn't dramatic enough to feel like a horror story. It's just disappointing enough to accept and move on. And that's the quiet cost of it all. Not a catastrophic failure, but a slow realization that the deal wasn't really a deal. If there's one takeaway from this, it's simple. Buying a monitor at Walmart isn't always wrong, but doing it blindly is. Once you understand how this system works, you at least get to make that choice with open eyes. Why you should think twice before buying a monitor at Walmart. At the end of the day, this isn't about saying Walmart is always bad, or that every monitor they sell is unusable. It's about understanding the risk you're taking, and how invisible that risk is when you're standing in the aisle. Walmart monitors look safe because the branding is familiar and the price feels right. But behind that price are compromises most shoppers never see until they've already committed. Lower quality versions, harder research, misleading comparisons, and problems that show up after returning the product no longer feels easy. That's why so many people walk away feeling slightly disappointed, even if they can't immediately explain why. The monitor works, but it never quite delivers what they expected. And once you've lived with it long enough, replacing it feels like admitting a mistake instead of fixing one. The real issue isn't that Walmart sells cheap monitors. It's that the system makes it easy to believe you're getting the same product everyone else is, when you're not. You're paying less, but you're also getting less, and that trade-off isn't clearly explained. Now you know what to look for. You know why these deals exist, how the downgrade happens, and why regret usually shows up late. That awareness alone puts you ahead of most buyers. So if you ever buy a monitor at Walmart again, at least it won't be blind. You'll understand exactly what you're trading away, and you'll know when walking away is the smarter move. And if this video helped you see something you hadn't noticed before, leave a like so more people don't make the same mistake, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, because the most expensive electronics mistakes are usually the quiet ones.